Well, I did it. I made one of those video shorts that says if you want to know more, go to the channel. This is that video. I don't like those, and they bug me. I don't ever click the link and follow through. So we'll see if anyone shows up. But I don't actually like that approach. So the theme is, I'm Irish. I'm half Irish. I'm half Indian. My father's from India. My mother's from Ireland. But my grandfather had a secret family. And how we all came to find out was this really bizarre series of events. So let's go back in time a little bit. Back it up. My grandmother married Eamon Edmund O'Ryan. Very Irish. And she was in the Land Army during World War II. And she was from Bournemouth, England. She was in the Land Army during World War II, and they stationed her in Ireland. And that is where she met my grandfather while she was stationed there. He was a reporter, I believe, at the time. He charmed her and convinced her to marry him. They did that. They lived in Ireland for a few years, actually long enough to have 3 children. So probably maybe, I'm going to think maybe 10, 11, 12 years, something like that. After they got married, they lived in Ireland. And my grandmother told stories about burning the sod and all these stories about enduring the Irish hillside right after World War II. Okay, so, but luckily my grandfather was, I believe, a very hard worker and very industrious, so sort of a provider. I don't think they were totally without, but it definitely sounded like it was a test of patience, internal fortitude, and knowing how to make a penny stretch. Like, actually, when my grandmother went to the restroom, she would say, I got to spend a penny. So, and she told me stories about how the whole house, which was 4 families, would share like 1 hour of fuel to cook for the day in the kitchen. So just things were different, apparently, very much so, just like here and in Europe after World War II. Of course they were. So, flash forward, now it's years later, and my grandfather has decided to come to America and bring his family. So my grandmother and her 3 children and my grandfather came to America. They ended up in Knoxville, Tennessee, of all places. My mother was 13. She went to the Catholic high school, and then she graduated from the Catholic high school in Knoxville, Tennessee, went to the University of Tennessee, and worked in New York on Wall Street and advertising and stuff like that. Lots of stories there. She met my father, and in one of the university classes, he was at a payphone, called my mother, and she recognized his voice. So anyway, that's a little bit of the wrong story. So here we go back to the Irish secret family. Granddaddy-O is what we call them. Brought my grandmother and her 3 children, my mother, my 2 uncles, over from Ireland to Knoxville, Tennessee. They lived for about 5 years together, and then my grandmother, maybe not even that long. I think one of her biggest goals for coming to America was to get divorced, because you couldn't get divorced in Ireland. My grandfather was a heavy drinker, and he had a heavy hand. She wanted to be divorced, and I think that was a great idea for my grandmother based on the stories that I've heard. I definitely glad that she was brave enough to come to a new country to overcome that. It cost her quite a bit, and she sacrificed a lot personally to overcome that hurdle. That's what you got to do. So then she worked at Sears, sold furniture. My mother got married to my father, 3 grandchildren. Flash forward. Now, my grandfather had moved to the Florida Keys and has remarried, or was living with someone. I don't remember seeing him after about 5 or 6, but I was very fond of him, but I think it bothered my mother. He wasn't a good man, and he was hard, heavy hand. And so she moved on with her life. She ended up living in Chattanooga, Tennessee, working for Tennessee Valley Authority, nuclear power plants. She was a new paint inspector in nuclear reactors. Oh, there's another set of stories. So, my grandfather passed away, we'll say 20 years ago. So, he's passed away 20 years ago. And he apparently had mailed a letter to his daughter in Nashville, Tennessee, which is strange because this is a letter from 20 years ago. and it shows up at my mother's house because the last name is the same, Orion. She lives in Chattanooga. This letter is addressed to a lady in Nashville, Tennessee, and it has the return address of my grandfather on it. So my mother opened it. It wasn't addressed to her, but it's like 20 years old. It just showed up in the mail, and it had her father's name on the return address, but it was addressed to someone else in Nashville. So she is too curious. She opened the letter. She found out that my grandfather had an entire second family, a whole secret family that was living at the other end of the state. And somehow that letter showed up many, many, many years later that was addressed to her years and years after he had passed away. And for some reason they delivered it to my mother because she was in Chattanooga, Tennessee with the last name Orion. But the letter was to someone else in Nashville. I would like to find out more information about that. I don't know how to go about that. I tried to do ancestry DNA. Nightmare. Not my jam. Everyone's dead. My mother and father and grandmother have all passed away. There's a couple of other relatives in Nashville still that it's so strange. I think the other family, and I think that is why I was never a part. Maybe we were the other family, but either way, my mother had children with an Indian man, so she got written out of the will and excommunicated from the inner circle. And the wealthy, they didn't want to commingle so much. So I think that we were separated from our family that we did have for different reasons. Self-preservation and sanity, to know that we are good people and worthy of being alive. Because there's people out there who don't feel the same way and somehow wanted to let you know that. And then, I don't know. But anyway, my grandfather had a secret family, and that's how my mother found out like 20 years later. And happy St. Patrick's Day. Peace, love, and chicken grease.